Hi, welcome to the module on categorical variables. We'll be looking at how to incorporate categorical, or what we also call qualitative variables into multiple linear regression. But first, let's take a look at quantitative versus qualitative variables or factors. A quantitative variable is one that assumes numerical values corresponding to points on a line. There are two main types of quantitative variables. One of them is continuous. A continuous variable is one that can take any value in the number line, including those with decimal points. And also we have discrete variables, which are also quantitative variables, but those have gaps in them, and mainly what that means is that they can't take all values. So for instance, if we have a variable such as the number of siblings in a family, that particular variable can't take values with decimals. So we consider those that have those variables that have gaps in them to be discrete. Mainly, R differentiates those variables with different classes, and the main classes used for continuous variables are D and UM, which stands for numeric. So that is the representation that quantitative variables of continuous types have in R, and discrete variables generally are assigned to the integer class in R. That generally doesn't have to be true. Integer, the way that R reads in data is that if it contains any decimals in it, actually they are assigned to the numeric class, and if it doesn't have any decimals in it, they are assigned to the integer class. Now remember, that doesn't necessarily that's not necessarily correct, but that is a good compromise. We will not be differentiating a lot between continuous and discrete types. And basically, if a variable is miscategorized to be, let's say, integer when it is numeric, or numeric when it is integer, that generally won't have any impact in the regression functions that we use. Now, qualitative factors are those that are categorical in nature. They have classes or levels in them. But I want to point out the fact that this is categorical in nature, and this doesn't, so we have to go a little deeper in what that really means. So for instance, let's take a look at this examples here. We have a quick, very small data set here for observations. There are a few variables in here. We know that sex, for instance, is a categorical or qualitative factor. And also we know that educational level is a categorical factor, and the main reason why people recognize those as such is because they have characters and classes, and the classes are easily distinguished. But just think about this other variable, let's say age group, where this is actually represented in numbers in this data set, but it is categorical in nature because the number is supposed to be representing a group. So although this variable is categorical, is qualitative, it actually will not be read correctly by most programming languages, including R and Python. So we have to be especially careful with those variables that are qualitative in nature, because if they are, we have to recode them and actually have them just be the right type. The same is happens with numerical variables. So for instance, Annual income here is a quantitative variable in nature, but because it has the number sign and also a comma in it, if we read it in R, it's most likely going to be automatically assigned to be a qualitative factor in most programming languages. We have to be careful with those. So just going back in terms of representation in software, quantitative variables are either NUM, the class numeric, or the integer class, and qualitative factors generally are assigned to the class factor in R. Okay, so we are mostly going to be deciding on how to represent, or basically taking a look at these main type of variables. It is extremely important that before we analyze a given data set, that we recognize if the variables have actually the right type. Right. So the next thing that we want to look at are the levels of a qualitative factor. And the levels of a qualitative factor is basically refers to the categories. So for instance, if we have the variable rating where the levels are actually not likely at all, not likely, least likely, somewhat likely, and most likely. So in this particular example, the variable rating has 5 different levels. So this is what we refer to the levels of a qualitative factor.